I usually ask for our guest speaker to send me a bio, but Erik has so much stuff on his website, and I typically take, just a chunk like this and I do it, but I had to add more to this because he's got a really unique and interesting upbringing that has brought him to this point today. So I am gonna, I don't mean to embarrass you or anything, but
it's okay.
I really, really enjoyed reading through that.
Thank you.
So Erik is a registered acupuncturist, and he's an associate with the Center for Chiropractic and Sports Rehab in Calgary. As I said, it's a bit of a unique story. I had never heard of Moose Factory Island before, but that's where he was born, in Canada. It's one of the earliest settlements in all of Canada. Where? Back in this Moose Factory Island. Where? Hudson Bay. It's
James Bay. You'll see a picture of it.
It's on the Moose River. I've never heard of that either. Anyways, it was one of the earliest trading posts established by the Hudson Bay Company. And it was quite isolated. It's obviously none of us have even heard of it. But this is where Erik was able to develop a really deep appreciation for the local people there, the Moose Cree Indigenous people, and that appreciation for an alternative worldview. It also allowed him to develop a deeper internal connection of his self, mind, and his body at a very early age. He initially had an interest in aviation, the freedom of flying. When I read that, I thought, I just thought he might want to fly out of there. And he's been an aircraft maintenance engineer for many years, about 13 years, I believe.
Yep.
Wow. In aviation, Erik was able to cultivate a wide range of skills and knowledge: communication, problem solving, strategies, meticulous attention to detail. And he combines that with his human biology classes and his knowledge around that. And that gives him another really unique perspective on how he approaches his work. Multiple personal injuries and health challenges led Erik to change his career. And after navigating through the healthcare system, like we all have struggled with at one time or another, it eventually led him to alternative approaches using acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. Indulging in this approach to healing, it allowed him to reconnect to his roots and to his health. And it's really why Erik's here today, to share his knowledge, his skills, so that we can find our way back to our health and our healing. So please welcome Erik.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me all right there?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. All right. My apologies, the first few slides have got a little bit of a glitch in them, so they might skip through quickly, so bear with me. Let's get started. And there they go. All right, this is a map of Ontario, and if you look up here is Moose Factory. So Moose Factory, to get to it, basically, you can't see it on the map here, but there's Cochrane, Ontario, which is about 12 hours north of Toronto. You're looking at about a 5-hour train ride. That'll get you to Moosonee, and then you're walking down again. It depends on the season, the docks, so you got to cross the water to get to Moose Factory Island. It was definitely an interesting upbringing, but I'm thankful for the experiences that I've had up there because they've definitely shaped who I am today. So thank you for that introduction, Celia. So, the Canadian educational requirements to become an acupuncturist are a minimum of 3 years. You need to complete a series of national exams over the course of about a year, and of course the colleges have to be approved by the regulatory body. In Alberta, you're eventually given the title of registered acupuncturist, and currently right now we've got Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and Newfoundland being registered. So just for your own awareness, if you were to go to a place like Saskatchewan, potentially you've got an individual that has not been trained that can still give you acupuncture. So just do your research. If you want to know who is registered in Alberta, you can just go to the regulatory body. All right, we're going to start with a brief history of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. The origins are not entirely known, but currently the oldest signs of acupuncture have actually been through a well-preserved mummified human being found in the Italian Alps in 1991. The body again has been dated to be approximately 5,300 years old. Origins aside, it has been the Chinese, though, that have definitely perfected the art. Beginning in 2000 BC, we have documents implementing the usage of herbs, and then theories which later develop into the foundations of what we know traditional Chinese medicine to be now. 1671, traditional Chinese medicine was integrated into Western society, first in France. 1881, the first college of medical practices were established in China. Unfortunately, the Chinese immigration resulted in the U.S. during 1888, and that's when we first started to see it over here in North America. But really wasn't until the 70s when Chairman Mao transformed traditional Chinese medicine, modernizing a lot of the techniques to align with Western beliefs, so it was generally more accepted. 1971, President Richard Nixon visited China. Upon returning, he advocated the usage and adoption of traditional Chinese medicine in the U.S., and this was really the birth of traditional Chinese medicine in North America and the modern Western world. 1980s, we saw the Ministry of Public Health outline the modern protocols, guidelines for medicinal practices, which included techniques both in Western medicine and traditional medicine. This promoted the establishment of several foundations and organizations devoted to the distinct branches of traditional Chinese medicine, including Qigong, Moxibustion, and acupuncture. In Alberta, 1988, acupuncture was regulated, and actually Alberta was the first province in Canada to be regulated. So, traditional Chinese medicine. When you hear about traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM for short, it's important to understand that the practice isn't just about acupuncture or herbs. It actually contains acupuncture, herbology, dietary therapy, cupping, gua sha, tuina, which is a form of massage, and qigong, although it's not written there. How does this medicine work? It's a little tricky. The foundations of traditional Chinese medicine are based on pattern recognition and differentiation. So from a TCM perspective, traditional Chinese medicine perspective, everything revolves around qi. Qi is a concept that is used to explain the functions of the body. Pathology is usually explained through metaphors and their association to nature. So over here we've got qi in its simplest form. You may have seen this symbol before, probably without any of the words. This is the Yin Yang symbol, and when we relate yin and yang, we consider them to be yin qi and then yang qi. So what is yang qi, or associations with yang qi? We've got male or masculine energy, day, hollow, dry, summer, earth, large, hot, fast could be something that you would associate with this. And then when we consider yin or yin type energy, we've got the feminine, the female, night, solid, moist, winter, death, small, cold. The tail ends on this actually show the transition of qi moving through different states. So either moving from a yang energy into a yin energy, or vice versa. Examples of this again in the natural world would be if you consider water. You've got water, you boil it, that is water being in its yin state, it's boiling, it's turning into its yang state, being the steam. And then the opposite of that would be you've got water more in its yang state, which is then transitioning into ice, and then being the solid, being a yin state, right? Another example here is the coexistence of both within each other. So you never really have a true 100% yang or 100% yin. There's always something that exists within each other. Water is kind of a good example of that. If we relate it to time of day, we can consider naturally 12 o'clock at night would be peak yin. Transitioning throughout the day, we move to peak Yang, 12 p.m. If we were related to the body's organs, we'll consider the Yin organs to be lung, spleen, heart, kidney, liver. The reason that they're Yin organs is because they're filled with something. Lung with air, spleen, blood, heart, blood, kidney, you've got a combination of blood, water, liver, blood. And then we move into the Yang organs. And when we relate Yang organs, again, if you look up to the chart again here, hollow. They're not always hollow. Again, that's the whole Yin and Yang type states, but for the most part they are. So large intestine, stomach, small intestine, urinary bladder, and gallbladder. So now, diagnosis. As the Chinese back thousands of years ago, approximately 4,700 years ago, did not have the ability to utilize the blood work and the MRIs and all of the functional testing that we have today, they utilized observation and related their observations to the natural world. So basically what they've developed in order to determine the functionality of what's going on with these systems is more commonly used being the 8 principles, 5 elements, which is demonstrated on the slide here, and Zhang Fu organ theory, which is also demonstrated in here. They're a little bit more complicated to get into and definitely take a little bit more time, so we're going to start with something very basic, the 8 principles, and we're going to relate them to, again, something that we can all relate to, the common cold. So if you consider then in pathology, you've been given the diagnosis of common cold. Common cold then is related to, of course, the influenza virus. Your common cold will be the same as the person next to you. There's no differentiation to what type of common cold you have. You've just been given the diagnosis of influenza, common cold. So the way you're treated is the same regardless of who you are, what symptoms you're showing. So if we go into a little bit more detail, we can take 2 patients. We've got patient A and patient B. So patient A and patient B both have the common cold, but yet their symptoms that they show are very different from each other. And this is what's really interesting with traditional Chinese medicine. This pattern is associated with the lung organ. In traditional Chinese medicine, we see the lungs to open up to the nose. Its responsibility is to descend and disperse air qi, very similar to what we have in our Western anatomical lungs. Metaphors that are then utilized here are, you might hear that you're being attacked by evil qi, which sounds odd. What this merely means is that you're relating to something pathological. The evil qi is just the way at the time, it was related to evil spirits. Obviously, we know that's not a thing now. The qi then is the pathology relating to either fungal, bacterial, viral, genetic in some cases. So with the common cold, we associate wind being another factor here. So this is an attack of evil wind qi. What does wind mean now? Like, you don't have wind going through your body. You've got to take it in the understandings of the characteristics of wind. Body aches, for example. You feel body aches, but the body aches are constantly moving through the body. They're never really in one space like wind. So again, this is just an example of how they sort of bring the natural world into explaining what's going on with the pathology. Going into a little bit more detail here then, the TCM diagnosis for patient A is a lung invasion of evil wind cold, and then patient B is a lung invasion of evil wind heat. So going back to what we were talking about in the previous slide, we utilize 8 principles. What is 8 principles? Very basically, is the pathology internal? Is it external? Is it excess? Or is it deficiency? Is it hot? Is it cold? And then is it yin or is it yang? So again, when we start to break down what's going on with these 2 cases, we'll take, is it internal or is it external? Patient A, patient B. They're actually both. An example of this, some of the signs and symptoms that we look into when we're looking at a pathology is pulse diagnosis. A lot of detail to get in there, but with traditional Chinese medicine, we have 29 different pulses. It's not just what's going on with your heart rate, it's the depth of how you feel the pulse, where you feel the pulse, it's the texture of the pulse. There's a lot more to it than just figuring out your rhythm. So the pulse is superficial. This indicates that it's on the exterior of the body. The tongue coat is thin. There's no internal signs. Internal signs we would associate more with like a cough, so it's deeper. You might have a thick tongue coat. We look at the tongue coats as well. And then the pulse would be deeper in this case if it was more internal than external. So next question, is it excess or is it deficiency? Well, both are excess. The pulse again is superficial, the tongue coat is thin. If we were to looking at more of a deficiency type pattern, the pulse would again be deep. We look at the tongue body would be moving. You might see teeth marks in the tongue. The coat might be dry. Again, small examples of a lot of bigger picture there. Going down then next is it hot or is it cold? Well, this is again a big separation. Patient A is cold. What are cold signs? We can look at the chills. We get a fever and chills, but the chills are predominating, so there's a more stronger sensation of chills. The nasal discharge is a clear, runny discharge. Is there a presence of sweat? No, there's a lack of sweat, and then there's no thirst. All of these signs are related to cold in traditional Chinese medicine. So then again, when we look at patient B, we see hot signs. We've still got the fever and chills, but there's more of a fever, hot. The nasal discharge is yellow, again, the sign of heat. The throat is sore, there is sweating, there is thirst, and the pulse is rapid, it's moving a lot faster. And then the final question, is it yin or is it yang? Patient A being more yin and patient B more yang. Now we start getting into the treatment protocol of how this person would be treated. Both patients, again, are treated with acupuncture, utilizing specific acupoints within the body. But when dealing with, again, something like this, which is a little bit more internal medicine, it's also really effective to incorporate diet and herbology. Patient A would be given a formula to release the exterior. It would be a warming, slight sweat-inducing, herbs. Recommended dietary therapy would be foods that are more acrid, pungent. Examples of this would be ginger, green onion, garlic, coriander, turnip. You'd want to avoid the foods that I'm going to mention that are going to be recommended for patient B. So patient B, again, would also be given a herbal formula to release the exterior, but also more characteristically cooling in nature, again, because this is a hot sign. Recommended foods would be celery stalk, eggplant, water chestnut, green tea, watermelon. Again, avoiding the foods that I just mentioned with patient A. Interestingly then, a late or improper diagnosis, poor environmental or dietary decisions can actually lead your pathology or these people's pathology into something a little bit more worse. So this might manifest if it's not been taken care of early, in the early stages, like when you see these symptoms, progressing into something a little bit more chronic like bronchitis or pneumonia. These are sort of the progressions of how things migrate in Chinese pathology. Again, our bodies utilize its resource to rid itself of pathologies, so if we don't allow ourselves to regenerate and heal, we make ourselves, again, more susceptible to other patterns or pathologies in the future. A more extreme example of this would be through like AIDS, HIV. It's very common for a patient to become critically ill and fall ill to something like influenza or